Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Chris Loehr. We won't say where you're from right now because we'll let you announce that when it's time.
No, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, just say I'm from nowhere right now.
From nowhere going somewhere.
That's exactly right. So good. I'm glad to be here with you today, Chris.
I appreciate it. This show is all about raw conversations. Before we hit record, we said, what do we want to talk about? It's nearing the end of year. We're in between two of the biggest holidays of the year, and you brought up the business decisions around how our businesses today, even in the same vertical, spending their money or planning to budget as we go into 2026. Where they put that spend. And you said something that for those listening may be brand new, never heard this, doesn't make any sense, but you said some are choosing to spend more and some are choosing to spend less. And let's just start with what you're seeing, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, just having conversations with people and just trying to figure out, what's going on, what they're trying to do. It's a little inconsistent, right? I think in the past you might have seen where, just take an example. I think, prior to the election year, you saw pretty much an across the board pause on things. People were kind of waiting to see what would go on. They weren't making a decision on who won the election. They were making a decision on, once the election's over, then there's some more certainty. There's certainty, right? Yeah. So, and what I'm seeing today now, we're kind of a year after that now, is I'm seeing some are like, hey, we're going to increase our spend. We're going to do some more things. And then we see others, maybe even in the same industry, maybe not exactly the same size, but not incredibly smaller, either flat, keep their budget flat, or even decrease and try to do more with less from a security perspective. And so it's been hard to kind of put the finger on exactly what that is. I can say what's interesting, though, is one thing I find that could be a common denominator would be private equity. And it just seems like a lot of people I'm talking to have some direct or indirect relationship with private equity. A lot of them seem that they're coming up on a turn or a transaction, and a lot of that can influence things a lot as well. Just recently I was made aware of an MSSP that just closed its doors, just like a restaurant. I mean, wow. Literally, like, boom, exit, closed. No, you can't get in. Nothing. The employees just found out then and there, and they were without a job. And I know that they were private equity owned, and they were a pretty well-known name. I won't mention them. People probably figure it out because everybody there has got their open to work picture on LinkedIn. But and they're good people. But I think in that particular situation, that was kind of one of those things where those types of decisions, which we haven't seen in the past, are getting made more quickly by investors and such. So, I mean, it's just kind of a weird climate going on. So I would say, to people out there, especially, the MSPs and even the MSSPs, try to get a good feel of what your client's going through, understand their business, and try to dig a little bit deeper so you can forecast things for yourself, because you don't want to be caught by surprise.
So we saw recently, Carolyn April and Matt Lee did a webinar talking about the research that GTIA just released around cybersecurity, state of the industry. And I had initially I had some issues with some of the things I saw, and it was my own ignorance because I didn't understand the pool or how the infographics were put together. But as Carolyn explained it to me, my brain started to really spin almost out of control in trying to understand hey, there's a huge opportunity for MSPs, MSSPs in the space of that consultative role in cybersecurity, and shifting away from the client dreads the phone call of like, you're just going to sell me something, or you just, this call is about what I need to buy from you in order to be safe. And I think what we're seeing is a shift, and I think it goes a little bit to the point you made about, one company makes a decision to spend less and one to spend more. They're not necessarily right or wrong decisions, but what's interesting about what's happening in the space right now is all of these other variables that are coming into play that are having a huge impact. You mentioned, the political climate of before the, election's over, and decision making around, like, now there's a new administration. What do I need to plan for? How does this impact my business? And now we're 10 months post the current administration, and we've seen a lot of drastic changes. We've seen drastic changes to the insurance space. We've seen drastic changes to the resources we have at a government level of like who I can reach out to and ask for help. The person that was there yesterday is no longer there. But do you think that there's at least on the resiliency side, that we're maybe making some progress in the positive direction against the threat actors with at least a maturity from an understanding of what's out there?
Yeah, I think that is happening. Just to kind of start out with that first is I think that's happening because I think number one, service providers are doing a better job of educating. Number two is I think there's more press about these types of things happening. Number three, though, I think the most prevailing thing is the fact that there are more peers that are being impacted, and people are finding that, right? So, I mean, if you're in XYZ industry and you're at some little industry lunch or industry conference or whatever, there may have been one person there out of 1,000 that was impacted. Well, I bet you it's more like 1 out of 5. And I think that's kind of scaring people a lot more. So I think that happens. And then kind of back to your point about, the research and about the consultative approach, that is where I see the success. And I tell you, it's kind of interesting because this topic has come up quite a bit with MSPs and myself. And I've known some MSPs that are like, hey, look, I don't care if my clients are involved in government stuff or not. CMMC level 2, that's what I'm going to do for all my clients. They're going to, hell, that's what they got to do. Take it or leave it. And I'm like, okay, good luck with that. I don't really see that approach working. Because, I just talked to somebody the other day. That was a company, less than 30 people, and they were impacted by a ransomware event. And, for them, if you told them that, they just say, well, I'm just going to close up shop.
Yep.
I'm not going to do it. And there is a way to kind of tailor something for them and to kind of step that. And I think that's another thing to kind of your question or your point is, I think we've done a better job of saying, okay, we need to get you here. The next year we need to get you here, and the next year we're doing here. So now we're probably kind of 2 or 3 years into that approach, and we're doing a better job of getting people protected. I think we're doing a better job of. I tell you what, we're really doing a better job, in my opinion, of vulnerability management. And I think if you want to look at the bad side is we've had a boatload of firewall vulnerabilities of firewall vendors that service providers use a lot and sell a lot. So for them, it's hit them in the gut. But at the same time, it's taught the MSPs as well as their clients through that practice that says, hey, look, I mean, it's going to hit the fan. We got to take action right now. We can't stop. I remember I was talking to somebody else the other day about they were informed by the FBI that they were under attack, right? And or that they were
not generally how you want to find out.
Yeah, that they were going to be under an attack, and they had a they used some firewalls, but they were updated. They'd taken all the precautions and everything, and they were just kind of asking me a question. It's more kind of like a friendly conversation, and if you listen to them, I was like, well, one thing you should do is probably just shut off VPN for now. And I think if I said that a year ago, they would have said, screw off. You're idiot. But they didn't. They're like, nope, we'll turn it off. And I said, let's just turn it off for a little bit, and your employees will figure out a way to work. And I bet you, and I haven't pressed them on it, but I said, okay, let's look at how your employees work to see if you could just eliminate the VPN entirely. So But those are things. I think things are.
So being
People are
more
understanding it more.
receptive is happening right now. Being more receptive to the guidance. So the ITSP says, "Hey, let's turn this off. Let's disable X. Let's make it unavailable for foreseeable future and see what happens." Rather than previously, it would have been like, "Hey, I'm hesitant to talk to the client." Then willing to talk to client. Client's like, "Yeah, no, you're not doing that."
Yeah, exactly right. I think people are becoming more cyber risk adverse,
Sure.
which is really good, and less willing to just accept risk. I think a lot of people would just accept things, say it's not going to happen to me, or I don't have anything important, or whatever. And I think they're finding out that doesn't work.
Well, Chris, I would say it's interesting when you think about the word risk in a conversation. I think back, it's been almost 10 years now since I had my MSP. We never walked into a client, or prospective client and said, "Hey, we'd like to talk about your risk," from the standpoint of the threat actors that are out there, or even a year ago, just listening to the pulse of the industry, like MSPs, MSSPs, they're very hesitant, not quickly, they're hesitant to go have a conversation with a prospective client or even existing client about the client risk. And then to double down, if I were to ask the MSP about their own risk, like they either jump to tools that are protecting them and aren't willing to really talk about the where they have those risks, what they're really trying to mitigate, what they're trying to transfer, maybe even elsewhere. But then they're quick to say things like, "Oh, well, I have cybersecurity insurance," and I started using this phrase, and you can correct me if this doesn't sound fair, but I like to think of it as buying cybersecurity insurance is like a future investment in failure. Not necessarily the failure of the MSP, but the failure of the infrastructure or the walls, the security layers that were built out. Something fell, and the threat actor got through. And I liken it to saying that just to get the reaction, because failure doesn't mean that you failed backwards and have to start over again. You can fail forwards, and I think that's one of the shifts we're also seeing is that we're not talking about when I fail and it's over. We're talking about I'm going to fail, but I can still survive and be resilient because they knocked out a server, not all of my servers. They knocked out one application, not all of my applications. They ransomed me, but the data that they got was encrypted, so they really don't have a whole lot. These conversations we didn't have.
That's right.
5+ years ago. We're like, "Hey, we can recover from backup," and yeah, they have all of our data.
No, you're exactly right. I think, and service providers were so focused on this very finite set of things and this finite box and this finite way of doing things,
Sure.
And all that kind of stuff, and then we were very quick to say, "Hey, we got it all handled, right? You don't have to worry about it. You focus on the business. We'll focus on all the technical stuff."
Yeah.
And then they started getting bit by that when their clients started getting popped. And then they're like, "Well, you told me you had everything covered." And you're like, "Well, but it's your fault for this or your fault. We warned you about this, but they didn't really, right?" So, no, you're exactly right.
I think there's a problem in the industry still today where and those that are MSPs or ITSPs, signing off on managed services agreements, and there's the indemnifications. I recommend X. You said no. And I know this is a gray area as far as being careful with what we do in the space of like the indemnification clause, if you will. But the more I see how insurance plays out, like it doesn't. If I recommend something and you say no to it, but I'm still willing to take your money for the pieces that you said yes to, am I setting myself up for a future really big problem as far as protecting my own entity?
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say the majority of the time, people do not sue their MSPs for whatever reason. And
Sure.
what's interesting is they will get blamed, and a lot of them will not leave their MSPs, no matter what.
Mhm.
Like, I've even been in situations where the MSP's like, man, we screwed up. We should have given them something better, blah, blah, blah. The client's there listening to that. And then the client just retains them or even renews with them or
Wow.
whatever, because, and I come from the banking world. I don't know if you liken it to just a banking relationship. You're like, man, dude, I really don't want to change banks. It's a pain in the butt, right? There's 1,000 steps. And so I don't know
I
what
thought you
that
said
is.
baking, and I'm like, well,
Oh
are
no.
we talking about loaves of bread here?
No,
Like,
right there
no,
thinking
no,
about,
banking. Got it. Yes.
thinking about the commercials. Yeah, but anyway, no, no, you're no banking, right? And so it's interesting, but the ones, but then again, I have seen MSPs get sued, and even though they have their ducks in a row, it doesn't stop you from getting sued, and you still have to go through all that pain. You have to go through the litigation and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's some red flags. I know kind of when we get calls for people that had an incident and didn't have insurance, right? And they just need some help. And you get, okay, these are the people we need on the phone, right? And we need somebody from the business on the phone with us so we can kind of talk out what needs to happen, all that kind of stuff. The next thing you know, no one's on the phone from the business. It's just their IT
Sure.
people. And you're like, well, that's a red flag. And then when you start asking them things to do or not to do or whatever, and they push back, that's a red flag. And so I think as service providers, we're so hungry for sales. A lot of times those red flags are there, and we should probably just walk away because, yeah, you're gonna run into an issue, just like you said. You might be setting yourself up for some pain.
Right. It's funny. I always say it's not necessarily that your best friend that's your client is who's going to sue, but what happens when they engage insurance and insurance decides to sue. And those are the things that I kind of look at. Like, there's all these things that we can do, but if out of the gate the definition of the arrangement you have with that client after the ink has dried is all the indemnifications, or you're signing off on I recommend it, but you still said no. Are those the companies that we want to work with anyway?
Hmm. No, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, I know, philosophically for me, it's always been that way, right? I mean, if you're not serious about security, that doesn't mean you got to do everything day one. But if you're not serious about security or doing something better,
Sure.
that's it. I mean, I did a tabletop exercise probably about 6 months ago. It is for a decent sized company. I usually don't do tabletops for companies of this size. Company had been around for well over, I think, 100 years. They're in the food business, and what's interesting is they had got popped a few years back in a ransomware deal, and fortunately for them, privately owned, family owned, multi
Sure.
generation type deal, and that family says, "Hey, tell us what we need to do. We're committed. We're never going to have it happen again." So that when I got to do that tabletop exercise and I'm going through all this stuff and I'm throwing all scenarios and curveballs at these guys, I mean, they had it covered. I mean,
Hmm.
and they did, yeah, they spent some money. They had money. They spent some money. They're in a highly competitive industry, but they spent some money, and they did it, and they did it in a very methodical way. They didn't do it overnight, but I
Sure.
mean, dude, I'm not going to say they were 100% resilient, but they were freaking. I mean, if you were to give a trophy out, they would be one that I'd give a trophy to, just from an architectural design, from a process design, from the different people that were there in the business, how well they worked together. There was no dispute on who was going to make a decision, when it was going to make a decision. If they had to go to the top, those people would be quickly available and respond. And so I just kind of like, that's like the best case scenario. And so if you can't find any, so you don't need to find anybody that's that willing to do things, but you need to find people that are willing to improve and understand, hey, this is a problem. It's not going to be something we can we can do a project and close it and be secure for the rest of our existence. It's going to be something that we continue to have to fight the battle.
It's
We
really
got to be
about taking
committed
it
to that.
seriously. Like, to your
That's
point,
exactly
like
right. It
if you're
is.
doing a tabletop exercise and a third of the team shows up, you're probably in trouble. If everybody
That's
shows
exactly
up,
right.
then you at least know that they're at least curious enough. Which, to some degree, in security, cybersecurity, being curious about the defined outcome or the goals of the outcome. That's how this gets started. If you're like, I don't care and I don't want to know, then when it happens, you'll just know that you don't have money.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And the crazy thing is most of these companies we're talking about. I mean, that's the livelihood, right?
Sure.
That company, its value, and and most likely they're looking at some exit in the future, or where that's going to let them sit up and retire and do things they want to do. And I don't think we just do a good job of giving those examples and explaining it. Says, hey, look, I mean, these cyber attacks, it's not like a little bruise on the side of your leg from bumping into the corner of the bed. This is like
more of a missing leg.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly right. It's an amputation, and it's probably going to be more than one limb, depending on what situation you're in. And so, no, you're exactly right. I think those types of examples and those things, and I think also MSPs got to use themselves as an example.
Yeah.
And say, hey, look, hey, I'm with you. I'm a small business. I'm a small business owner or whatever. This is what we do. Like, sure. Hey, something happens to us. I mean, it could end our business tomorrow just because all our clients get impacted or our reputation's gone and those types of things. And so maybe you can use some of that verbiage or language to help your clients relate to the situation or your prospects, or to vet your prospects.
Which was the hardest part. We now have stories that are far more tangible to any prospect than we did. So to throw a curveball and bring it back to the beginning, we were talking a little bit about one of the variables that you brought up, which was the private equity was a commonality around to invest or not invest in some of the cybersecurity resources. I've seen studies that show things like phishing simulations, those that do it versus those that don't. And then if you were looking at what the outcome was, the ones that didn't do it might be less likely than the ones that did do it to being victims of an actual phishing attack. I don't know that I agree with it. I don't know that the research is necessarily capturing maybe the spirit behind it, but regardless, it comes back to private equity in the mindset of private equity now has to look at when we invest in a MSP or MSSP, we invest in their clients. How are we approaching their cyber resilience? Because that variable that has a cost attached to it to bring those profit margins up by reducing, expense, are we setting ourselves up for future loss?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, I'll start off on the phishing deal, and I don't know. That's pretty tough. You'd have to kind of carve into the research and look at what the simulation, and maybe people are just it's poor simulation. So
you want to click on the links, man. Come on. We are programmed.
Want
we are programmed. When it's underlined, we're like, where does that take me?
That curiosity. That's right. And I do think that the word like when you're doing cybersecurity improvements, people will call it investments, but is it really an investment? I mean, it is more of a risk mitigation deal, right? So when you say, hey, we're making an investment, what's the return? Well, there's no return. I mean, it's the same thing as buying insurance. You don't say, hey, I'm buying insurance, like from a general liability perspective. I'm not buying that investment to get a return. I'm buying that investment to mitigate future loss. And right. I think that's where we're at. I think there's some. What else I was thinking about this one is I have seen where you can help. Some security decisions can kind of help further the business. So a good example would be SaaS. You may have a client that's just like, hey, look, we're traditional servers in the closet. Those things have served me well. Those are the same servers I had when I opened this business 25 years ago. Yeah, that's right. And hey, it's served me well. Why? If it's not broke, don't fix it type thing. And you're like, man, you got to get off of that stuff. And you're trying to come up with all sorts of technical reasons or architectural reasons. But then you're like, hey, well, maybe there's some SaaS solutions out there from a business perspective that can improve their business. And so then if I attack it that way, and you can use whatever security stuff that's going to have to be required to move them into those SaaS solutions, you're basically doing that through a business initiative versus a purely security initiative. So I think you got to get creative in some ways like that with some of those types of things. And maybe you can turn it into an investment, but it's not titled security. It's titled, hey, we're moving this to the cloud because it's going to give our people that are more remote quicker access, better control. We're going to be able to do all these cool things and automate things that we weren't able to automate before. And, oh, by the way, in order to get this implemented, we're going to have to do stuff like single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and logging, all this kind of stuff. That's just part of the project plan. You don't really have to talk about it as much. So I think those are some other ways we can maybe get some of these tougher people across. But the problem is if they're a prospect, are you going to spend the time to convince them as a prospect to do that versus an existing client that you say, well, I can get them maybe moving forward that way?
But isn't that fundamentally the problem? We have been in this industry. This industry has existed for a very long time. We've used lots of language and only recently started using phrases like, and to be resilient against threat actors, cybersecurity is important because of what, no, like, do you think about things like SSO and multi-factor authentication? You're creating an environment that says, I want to know it's you and not somebody else. Forget the security part. Like, these tools and resources, cybersecurity is a byproduct of what they actually solve for. It's like, do you actually work for my company? I remember I was working in construction management many years ago, and we had one of our staff, his girlfriend decided it'd be a good idea to use the Post-it note on the monitor and log in and change his password and then break up with him. And the amount of drama that we went through to sort of get back to, like, this person doesn't work here anymore because that should have never happened. Those weren't cybersecurity problems. They were business and people problems. And yet to this day, the things that we put in place, most people would argue they would literally jump to, oh, those are great cybersecurity resiliency solutions. It's like, yeah, we did it so that his girlfriend could stop logging in as him. Like, call it what you want. Like, we've created something that we lead with that is really more of a byproduct and should be the least focused on part. It's like efficiency, productivity, keep your doors open, maintain your business, like risk, all those things that had existence prior to us talking cybersecurity. I think cybersecurity is, in fact, a made-up word in order for us to talk about the same thing at the same time. It's a common verb or whatever you want to call it.
No, I agree with you. It's kind of I remember the first bank that I worked for, they were incredibly paranoid about salary information getting compromised. And so what had to happen was, so we had our main building that the majority of us were in, and across the parking lot was kind of another building we had some people in, and our HR sat over there in that building. And so we were not allowed to put any salary information on the network. And so this will date it a bit, but the HR person, we had to fit the HR person, and each executive had a zip drive. And that's the only one reason for salary information. So the HR person would save it on that zip disk and then walk it across the parking lot when she needed to talk about salary information and increases and all that kind of stuff. They'd put it in the COO's zip drive or whomever, the CEO, it didn't matter, whoever they're having the conversation with. And that's how things go. So if you frame things around that problem,
yep,
you got things done. Like, I remember that same bank is my boss I reported to at the time, the CIO, super bright guy, been around a long time, a consultant, knew his stuff, was in the military, had to work with like nuclear missile silos and stuff. So he even had some crazy scenarios about
DOS. At least he knew DOS.
Yeah, or like he's like, hey, people would come in and clamp the cabling, and I'm like, no one's gonna do that. But anyway, that's fun. But he was. But he and I said, hey, we need one of the things was like asset. Like, we need to know what we have. We need to keep track of our assets and everything of that nature.
Sure.
So we go and we put together this proposal for this system and everything like that to keep track of all that stuff, little stickers and inventory and all that jazz. And I'm talking more about fixed assets. And, the CFO looks at it and goes, hey, we can get, like, I can't remember the number, like, 15% of our stuff can get stolen and we'd still be less money than we're going to end up paying for this thing. Right. And I mean, he had a point. So that wasn't a pain. Like, for them, they didn't care about that. Now, if I had said, hey, well, you keep track of that salary information, maybe it would have been a bit different. So, yeah, I think you've got to find, not frame it and use that word cybersecurity so much, is frame those things that maybe are most important. I think a lot of people are paranoid about internal theft and internal issues, books of business going on. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine that moved from one job to another, and the company he left is very large, and the company he's going to is large, but not that large. But there's this lawsuit over non-competes and all this other kind of stuff, and it's crazy. So that company cares about that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where if you find those soft spots of your client, or even when you're talking to prospects and you find that soft spot, you're right. You can talk about the risk of that and not just use this overarching term of cybersecurity.
All those other things are tools. Yeah, all those other things are tools. In fact, I would argue that today we are far more resilient in what's in our toolbox than we've ever been. Like, hey, sign up for this new tool, and it's like even if it's brand new out of the box, odds are the likelihood of it doing what it's claiming to do is probably in that 80% to 90% of it will do that, versus 10 years ago when they're like, it does these things. And you're like, well, it did 2 of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. And I think people are getting smarter too. I know somebody reached out to me, has asked me about a specific tool. And I said, no, I love that tool. This is what it does. And this is why I like it. But I said, it's one of those things you're going to get out of it what you put into it, right? It can do it does like 1,000 great things, but you got to do 1,000 things in it to get the benefit of that. And it's not one of these things you just click. And they said, well, they say they can replace this other tool. And I'd look on the website and I go, man, I know this. I didn't think they did that. And I looked through it. And I said, nope, there's nothing I found on this website that says they do what this other tool does. But my point to that is the MSPs are becoming smart enough now where they're asking those questions and just not taking that salesperson's and saying, hey, I'm going to run with it because you're telling me it's that. It's not, because that's a security thing, and you better hope that if they say it's going to do that, it's going to do that. Because if it's wrong, that's on you. It's not like a printer going down or a server going down. It has a much bigger impact.
That's not uncommon, and I think you're seeing like Cyberize with Matt Lee, the thing that they're doing where like my product does these things, and then having someone actually vet that is a big deal. Well, we're running out of time, so the last question I have for you is there any book that you're reading right now that our audience should be reading as well?
Holy moly, yes. I am. Well, actually, I'll tell you what. I just finished one, so let me get that book, because I haven't started a new one yet, but I just finished this one. So let me make sure I get the title right and everything. So I'm terrible at that. Because Mastering HubSpot is not the one that I would tell people.
That's probably not, the audience. If you're mastering HubSpot, then that's awesome. But
that might hurt my street cred too. No, so it's called Team Intelligence: How Brilliant Leaders Unlock Collective Genius. And it's by a guy named John Jon Levy, Levy. And I really like that book. It kind of it has a good sense of humor in there, but he actually discredited. I agree with him on a lot of things that people put a lot of trust in ways of kind of measuring your team and stuff. And I'm like, no, that doesn't really work. I never thought that would work, but people bought into it. This kind of guy goes through and dispels all that. So nice. I like it. It's another book before that I'm probably going to go back and read that. I haven't, but go check that one out.
All right. Sounds good. For those of you that have been listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks, and have a great week.